Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Developing a Proper Worldview. This is going to be episode number 44, and we've just started part 3 of our series. And really, this is kind of a parenthesis in between parts 2 and 4, or 2 and 3. We looked at first, we outlined the gospel. Tried to do my best to show you some videos to if you're not saved, to lead you on the path to salvation, because everything we're looking at is from a biblical perspective. You have to understand that this is God's world, that the kingdoms are under his sovereign direction. Everything is under his sovereign control, including principalities, powers, demons, devils, angels, people, nations. Everything is under his guidance and control. Nothing occurs that he has not planned and outlined and in many cases foretold in the scriptures. All things work according to his purpose and his counsel. And so you have to understand that the events that are occurring in the world, the philosophies that undergird them, the mindset of the people in control is all part of God's plan. And that plan is ultimately to bring about the return of Jesus Christ, the destruction of this world system, the glorification of his saints, and really the conquering victory of the Lord Jesus Christ. And all things will be gathered together into him. And so you need to understand that. You have to have, since we're looking into these things, that yes, they're occurring on a world stage, but they are spiritual issues. So you have to have spiritual life. You have to have spiritual eyes to understand these spiritual things. And so we spent part 1 really just outlining that and showing your need for the gospel, your need for salvation, and how eternity is at stake. This is a life and death battle between good and evil, between darkness and light, between God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit, and the devil and his demons. And you're on one side of the battle or the other. There is no neutral ground. And if you're not born again, you're outside the kingdom. And regardless of how much you know, how much you resist, you're playing into the devil's hands if you're not with Jesus Christ. So you have to have that. And like I say, eternity's at stake. Without Christ, we will all perish and suffer the just wrath of God in an eternal hell. So you must be born again. Once you have that, it's important to understand that the devil's main aim is to discredit the scriptures. And so he wants to discredit. The scriptures point out that God is creator, that he has made all things. And so the devil's, one of his first jobs is to present alternative theories, so to speak, which is really just fantasy. And the main one that dominates society, that dominates the thought life of those who resist God and turn away from God, is the theory of evolution. And so we spent part 2 showing how foolish evolution is, how unscientific it is, how lacking in evidence it is, how insane it is, how opposed to God it is, and how the real truth of things is that all of creation points toward there being a creator, an intelligent designer that we know to be the God of the Bible, and his son Jesus Christ. And so that was part 2. And then part 3, we're moving into where we're going to show America's part in it, in this world system, this anti-God, anti-Christ system, that the politicians refer to as the New World Order, that the Bible refers to as a beast system, the beast of Revelation 13. And so we're showing America's part in that, and how really America is the muscle behind the machine of the New World Order. America is the empire builder. It's the financial and, more importantly, the military strength arm to drive this New World Order empire. It's the driving force that's laying the foundation for a world government, an anti-God, immoral, hedonistic world system. And so we're showing how America was founded with a foundation of occultism, how a lot of Luciferian occult activity is behind the workings of America. And so we're going to be moving into that realm. And like I said, we're in this weird, like a parentheses. I've got 2 DVDs I want to look at that really don't fit in any of these parts, that because they're kind of all encompassing. So we're doing this now where we're getting this general overview of how the Bible prophesied these events, how the world is fulfilling these events. And it's called Megiddo. And with the last one, we looked at part 1, really just showing how the Bible proves itself through prophecy, and that false prophets abound, and we can tell them by their failed prophecies, by their nonsensical prophecies that people have to interpret and decide what it means. And you can make, like, if I were to just recite a poem, or just say something like the frog crossed the river and went into the woods, you could come along and take that and say, well, the frog represents China, and the river represents the ocean, and into the woods represents America. So it's talking about China coming into America. Like, you could take my poem, which had nothing to do with any of that, and make it mean whatever you want. And that's what people do with, like, Nostradamus and stuff. His stuff is nonsensical, and people can twist it and make it say anything they want. But the God of the Bible gives specific, detailed prophecies that are fulfilled in history to the letter, and prove the validity of the scriptures, and prove that this is a God-breathed resource. And so we're looking at that, and we're going to move more into the occultism, looking at that. And so I went really long with my commentaries and my introductions last time, so we'll keep it short here. And we left off at the 44-minute mark, so we're going to pick up there on the first disc of Megiddo Part 1. So yeah, let's just jump into it. All right, here we go.
Old thriving civilization for over 1,000 years. That was the Eastern Empire, and didn't break down really until the Muslims finally took it over.
So important is the understanding of the 4 world empires that God showed Daniel another vision of these kingdoms, symbolized by 4 great beasts. The 4 beasts parallel the 4 dimensions of the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream.
All 4 beasts are history. There have been 4 world empires: the Babylonian, the Medo-Persian, the Grecian, and the Roman.
While most researchers agree that the first 3 beasts have come, it is this 4th beast that has yet to reach its complete fulfillment.
False. I don't know why they say it. Like, there's these people, and we'll further down the road get into the pre-trib rapture era, which is a stem off of dispensationalism. So they have this false idea that there's this future Roman Empire coming, failing to realize that not only did Rome exist historically and fulfilled the prophecy, it was the 4 legs that we saw in the first prophecy, and in this beast prophecy, it was the dreadful and terrible beast. Not only was that fulfilled with the actual Roman Empire that existed during Jesus' time, but it currently exists in the form of the Roman Catholic Church. So they fail to realize that, and they're looking forward to some future Roman Empire, but that's not what we get in Revelation. What we get in Revelation is a worldwide kingdom, a 5th beast, so to speak. We've had the 4 historically that were prophesied in Daniel. There's yet another one coming that's foretold in the book of John. So it's a minor thing. You'll still get a lot of good information out of people who believe this, and there's a lot of similarities and overlappings, but we're not looking for a revived Roman Empire in the future. That's not what's going to happen. It's not going to be the revived European nations under the banner of Rome. That's not what we're looking for. Is a coming world organization. Not just a Roman Empire or world. Yes, it'll be guided and so in a sense there is a Roman influence, because in Revelation 17 it talks about the woman riding the beast, a woman guiding and directing this world system, and that woman is the Roman Catholic Church, which I don't like referring to them as a church. They're not a church. It's the Roman Catholic institution. So if you hear me say Roman Catholic institution in the future, that's what I'm referring to.
Of the vision, Daniel wrote, "Behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible. It was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns.
When Rome collapsed,
And
it
there came
collapsed
up
into
among
10
them
kingdoms.
Another little horn. In this horn were
That's
eyes
Roman
like the eyes of a
Catholicism.
man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints,
Who
and
kills the
prevailed
saints and
against them,
martyrs them?
until
Fox's Book of Martyrs says that Rome, the Roman Catholic institution, is responsible for killing 50 million Christians, the saints. It makes war with the saints. That little horn spoken of in Daniel here is the Roman Catholic institution, and it will rule until the Ancient of Days come, until Jesus Christ returns and destroys this system.
the Ancient of Days came. Then the angel who stood by said, "The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom on earth, and shall devour the whole earth. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings
The
that shall
European
arise,
nations
and
that came out
another
of
shall
Rome
rise
when Rome
after them."
collapsed.
The 10
And the
kings
Pope,
are also represented by the 10
Roman
toes of the
Catholic.
statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Daniel prophesied that in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed.
So which kingdom shall never be destroyed? The kingdom of Christ, the kingdom that exists within us right now. When did the kingdom of Christ get established? In the days of these kings, in the days of Rome. When the Roman Empire was around, that's when Jesus Christ came, the rock cut without hands that we saw in the earlier prophecy.
So we know that the millennial kingdom of Christ can only occur at a time when there are 10 kings ruling the world. This revived Roman Empire will come under 10 heads. Now, I never believed there were the 10 nations, Western Europe, because the Roman Empire itself was much larger than Western Europe. Went all down through Syria, Turkey, Syria, and Lebanon, and all across North Africa, and so forth. So it will be, the world will be divided into 10 regions under 10 local heads. And already for computer reasons, for banking reasons, the world has been divided. The Club of Rome divided the world 25 years ago into 10 regions. And that's pretty much the way it's laid out today. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will establish a kingdom.
He's failing to realize that the kingdom has already been established. That's the problem with this dispensational futurist view, which they get some things right but some things wrong. They're failing to realize that the kingdom of Christ already exists. The kingdom of Christ is within us. We're born again. That kingdom's growing. Every time somebody gets born again, that kingdom is worldwide and spreading. But it's a spiritual kingdom. Jesus even said, if my kingdom were of this world, my disciples would fight. But my kingdom's not of this world. It's a spiritual kingdom that was established during the days of Rome. So they're failing to realize this, and they're looking ahead there. So they're missing that aspect of it, and they're saying, oh, what was once the Roman Empire will be revived worldwide and divided into 10 kingdoms, and during that time the physical return of Christ will happen. So they're missing a few key elements there, or their wrong theology is causing them to view the scriptures incorrectly. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. And don't take my word for it, do your own research, but if you study, like if you look into the collapse of Rome, what happened when the Roman Empire collapsed, it divided into 10 kingdoms, the 10 toes or the 10 horns. And then while that was happening, a small horn rose up, which was Rome, the Pontificus Maximus, the Bishop of Rome, which became the Pope, took the titles of Caesar to himself and claimed him the authority over these kingdoms. And so there was 10 kingdoms, and this little horn came up, and all of them bowed down except for 3, the Oscas, or whatever they're called, I can never ever remember the name of them. There's 3, but if you do your research, you'll find them quick. And they refused to submit to popery. They refused to submit, and so that little horn tore them out, cast them down. That's what happened historically. So we've seen the fulfillment of this prophecy. It's not yet to be fulfilled in the future. It has occurred. What's yet to be fulfilled in the future is Revelation 13.
So if the rabbis had known that one prophecy, the disciples of John the Baptist known that one prophecy, it would have solved a lot of problems for them. Because John the Baptist sent two disciples, remember, from prison. He said to Jesus, "Art thou he that should come, or look we for another?" Hey, Lord, I would at least be prime minister. I introduced you to Israel. If you're going to take the throne of your father David, how come I'm about to get my head cut off? It doesn't make sense. They thought the kingdom would be established then. No, it will only be established when those 10 kings, in the days of those 10 kings.
These 10 kings were also witnessed by the Apostle John, who saw a vision of a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. The angels.
So that part could be right. The Club of Rome is an actual organization that actually, for banking purposes, as far as I know, really does have the world divided into 10 regions. So that might be what John is. There might be a world and I wouldn't doubt that when this world beast system is formed, it could be divided up into 10 regions. I don't know what the 7 heads and 10 horns is. Maybe it's the 7 continents. I don't know why it has 7 heads and 10 horns, but that makes sense. That would be 7 continents. It's a worldwide system that's ruled with these 10 regions. But again, it's not the revived Roman Empire of Daniel's vision. That was the actual Roman Empire, and it's important to recognize that, because if you don't recognize that, then there's a chance that you don't recognize that little horn is popery, and like it takes your eyes off of Pope, off of Roman Catholicism, which is the enemy of the Christian faith, which is the Antichrist, so to speak, the woman that rides the beast. And Dave Hunt gets that. I mean, he wrote a book called The Woman That Rides the Beast, and he outlines how that's Rome. But then the dispensational pre-trib stuff just gets mixed in, and throws a few things off.
Said to him, "The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." So the world is to be ruled by 10 men, who will ultimately give their power to one man, the little horn of Daniel's vision, the mysterious figure known as the man of sin and son of perdition, Antichrist.
Yeah, see, they're missing the fact that is Rome. That's Roman Catholicism.
Well, the Antichrist will be somebody from the past, like Hitler or Genghis Khan, or who knows what, resurrected. No. Satan cannot resurrect anybody. He does not have that power. It says he has a deadly wound. See, people talk about this is the fourth beast represents the Antichrist and the revived Roman Empire. Then it says, I saw one of his heads. He's got 7 heads. I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world went after the beast. So this is not a resurrection. The beast has never been killed. You can read your history. I don't know much about history, but I read a little bit of history, and I can tell you, that all down through history, all the great families in Europe, they've all dreamed of the revival of the Roman Empire. This empire has never been dead. It was wounded, as it were, to death, but the deadly wound was healed. This is a healing, not a resurrection.
And all the world wondered after the beast, and they worshipped the dragon who gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" The Bible says that all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb. Scholars believe this worship denotes a one-world religion focused on both the dragon, whom the Bible calls Satan, and the beast, or Antichrist. This apostate church, as some have called it, is symbolized by yet another figure in John's revelation. The angel said to him, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot that sits upon many waters." So he carried me away, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations.
It's Roman
And
Catholicism.
upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots.
So the reason the Bible calls this woman Mystery Babylon, and you can get a book by Alexander Hislop called The Tale of Two Babylons, And it shows that how, because the Babylonian religion was referred to as a mystery religion. It was the hidden mysteries, Gnosticism. The occult knowledge was hidden from the masses, and the priesthood held it and would dish it out in levels. And that same system passed on through like Egypt and Greece and all these different pagan systems. But Roman Catholicism has taken the Babylonian religion and mixed it with Christianity, which is why it's called a harlot. She's taken the system, the rituals, the traditions of Babylonian mystery religion and given them Christian titles. So as where once we had the birth of Tammuz was celebrated on December 25th, Rome says, we'll just change that and call it the birth of Christ on December 25th. The Bible doesn't say when Jesus was born. That's just completely made up. It's adopted from Mystery Babylon. The rosary beads, adopted from pagan culture. The worship of statues and idols. They took all the Mystery Babylon gods and deities and just renamed them with angels and saints. Called it Peter or whatever, or Michael the Archangel, or Mary, the Mother of God. They've borrowed all these concepts and traditions of Mystery Babylon and given them Christian titles, committed whoredom, cheated on God with these false gods, mixed it together and presented to the world as Christianity, but it's really just Mystery Babylon hidden behind the cloak of Christian titles. So Roman Catholicism, the institution of Roman Catholicism, its religion, is Mystery Babylon repackaged with Christian titles. And so that's why this woman has the title Mystery Babylon, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And again, when you go through Revelation 17, it gives very specific details on who this woman is. She's decked out in scarlet and purple, gold and pearls. She has the golden cup of abomination. We covered these on the last one. They're all fulfilled by Rome. The city on 7 hills is specified in Romans 17. And again, she sits on the beast. So, and this the whole thing is complex because you've got things that have been fulfilled in history. You got things that are futuristic, and it's all kind of blended together in prophecy. And so the idea here, Daniel had this the statue vision of the 4 kingdoms, which we see was Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the 10 toes. Rome broke down into 10 kingdoms. Then he had a second vision where he saw this same representation, but instead of seeing it as a statue, he saw it as beasts. The first beast was like a lion. The Babylonians adopted the lion as their symbol. The second one was a bear raised up on one side. The Medo-Persian Empire, one of those kingdoms, I can't remember if it was the Medes or the Persians, was stronger. It was raised up. The third one was a leopard with 4 wings. A leopard is known for its speed, and Greece conquered the world swiftly and then divided into 4, the 4 wings. And then you had the fourth beast, which was dreadful and terrible, made of iron. I believe Rome was known as the Iron Empire. It crushed all resistance like iron and stamped out. So this fourth beast was the Roman Empire, and during the reign of that Roman Empire, the kingdom of Christ came on the scene. The rock cut without hands, on a supernatural kingdom, a spiritual kingdom that crushes these other 4 in the end. That's still futuristic, but is growing and growing as everybody's born again. People are being I'm in the kingdom of Christ right now. If you're born again, you're in the kingdom of Christ, and this kingdom is growing. So that's what Daniel saw, and then he saw that dreadful and terrible beast, that fourth beast, the Roman Empire. He saw that it had on its head 10 horns, just like the 10 toes of the first vision. And out of those 10 horns came a small horn, full of names of blasphemy, and it conquered 3 of the horns. And when you look in history, that's exactly what happened. When the Roman Empire collapsed, a small horn speaking blasphemies, popery, Roman Catholicism rose up and conquered 3 of those European nations that refused to bow down. So you had a fulfillment of Daniel's prophecies. Then John comes along in Revelation and has a vision of another beast, where all tribes, all tongues, all nations will worship him and will take a mark of obedience. That's futuristic. That's some future kingdom that's coming. And yes, it had 7 heads and 10 horns. And again, I think maybe the 7 heads represent the 7 continents, showing again that it'll be worldwide. The 10 horns, I got no problem saying it'll be divided into 10 regions. The Club of Rome does have a document on that showing that they've got the world divided into 10 kingdoms. So, but then in Revelation 17, we read about this woman who rides the beast, directs and controls and guides the beast system, and it's Rome. It's that little horn. The woman is the little horn. The little horn, the woman, they are the same thing as the Antichrist, the man of sin, the son of perdition. These different titles are given. That is Roman Catholic institution. And the Reformers knew this. John Calvin, Martin Luther, they all knew this. It's something that's been lost on the modern church because we've adopted this dispensational idea that there's some future world ruler coming that will be the Antichrist. And I don't doubt that this beast system will have a figurehead. But the Antichrist is this woman that rides and controls the system. And so maybe this other one is the false prophet. That's where prophecy gets. There's also a false prophet mentioned, and a secondary beast that caused the whole world to worship the first beast. So some things are hard to understand what's meant by it. But we can't take our attention off of Roman Catholicism because she doesn't have the power that she once had during the Dark Ages, because Napoleon banished popery, took her land from her, and since then she's just been kind of slowly rebuilding control over the world. And in America, we certainly don't see that kind of control, but so I'm just kind of rambling here because I'm trying to give an overview of the way I understand these prophecies. What is yet to come is a world kingdom that, yes, will have a figurehead, but Rome, the Roman Catholic institution, will control and direct this beast system. So don't take your eyes off of Roman Catholicism.
And abominations of the earth.
I mean, this is incredible. This is the 4th time this beast has been seen in the Bible. Never did it have a woman on his back before. We never hear an expression of surprise or astonishment from anybody, but now he says, when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. He doesn't admire her, he's astonished. A woman rides the beast, and not like in a rodeo, this critter isn't trying to buck her off. She's apparently in control. A woman on a beast? And this horrible world-devouring creature? And a woman is riding on it, apparently directing it. And I think the Bible makes it very clear who that woman is. Well, he gives us all the identifying characteristics.
So Dave Hunt gets this part right.
While the specific identity of the harlot is a matter of great debate,
on end times, like on 90%.
Most scholars agree she represents a world religious system and is called a harlot because of her unfaithfulness to God. It is believed this religious system somehow controls or manipulates the coming one world government, symbolized by the fact that the woman rides the beast. There are signs the world is speedily coming to an end. These words are attributed to an Assyrian clay tablet dated 2800 BC. It seems that men have believed the end is near in almost every generation. Pope Innocent III pronounced the second coming of Christ in the year 1284 AD because this date was supposedly 666 years after the founding of Islam. There have been many such predictions that have often compelled men to extreme behavior. In 1669, a cult in Russia known as the Old Believers began setting themselves on fire to protect themselves from Antichrist. It is reported that by 1690, 20,000 people had perished as a result. In the 19th century, a second Adventist named William Miller convinced thousands that the world would end in 1843. But when that date came and went, Miller recalculated and claimed the date was really October 22nd of the following year. Charles Taze Russell, the claimed founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses, was convinced by Nelson Barber that Jesus Christ had returned in 1874.
It's amazing how these people set dates. The Bible specifically said nobody knows the day or the hour.
The millennium began in 1874 with the return of Christ. Russell would later revise his view, and since then the Jehovah's Witnesses have predicted the world would end in 1914, 1918, 1925, 1941, and 1975. But as contrary as they seem, even these things are the fulfillment of God's prophecies. Jesus said, "Take heed that no man deceive you, for many shall come in my name, and shall deceive many. False prophets shall rise," he said. "Behold, I have told you before." The Lord said that of that day and hour knows no man. Some have taken this to mean that Christians need not pay attention to Bible prophecy. But Jesus also said, "Watch therefore, because you do not know what hour your Lord will come. And what I say unto you, I say unto all, watch."
Amen.
Considering these things, what is it about this time on earth that sets it apart from all those centuries that have come before us?
Any time prior to the 20th century, the 666 and any other date that has actually been predicted would have been an impossibility as far as what the biblical parameters were in the model that Jesus set forth to show forth the end of the world in Armageddon. And we know that because the Bible told us that Israel would have to become a nation again. We know that Israel would have to become a nation again based on several different prophecies.
And the most significant prophecy, I think, has to do with the restoration of Israel to its land, which happened in 1948.
Right after World War II, you had this great influx of Jews who became later Israelis into the ancient homeland of Israel after 2,000 years of diaspora. 2,000 years, almost. You've got these people coming from all over the world into Israel in 1948. Now, 48 is when they became a homeland, but prior to that, they were all there. From the end of the war, from 45 on, they were there, and we all know what happens. The British pull out, and, a nation becomes a nation in a day. It's kind of bizarre after 2,000 years.
Some have considered that certain prophecies concerning the return of the Jews to the Promised Land may have been fulfilled when they returned from their ancient captivity in Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. Yet centuries after this return, Jesus prophesied that they would be scattered again in fulfillment of further prophecies. Jesus foretold of the destruction of Jerusalem and the scattering of the Jews, an historic event now known as the diaspora that would occur in 70 AD. He spoke of the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. For there shall be wrath upon this people, he said, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
When he brought them into the land, he warned them, if they disobeyed his voice, he would cast them out, not just next door. He would scatter them to every nation on the face of this earth. You find that in Amos 9:9, you find that in Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. All through the Bible, over and over and over, God said he would scatter them, he would sift them like wheat among all the nations of the earth. And it happened. We call them the wandering Jew. You find them everywhere. And God said that during their dispersion, they would be hated, persecuted, killed, mocked, like no other people on the face of this earth. Anti-Semitism is laid out in detail.
In the Old Testament, God said to the children of Israel, "It shall come to pass, if you will not hearken to the voice of the Lord your God, that all these curses shall come upon you." The Lord shall cause you to be defeated before your enemies. and you shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. And you shall be left few in number, whereas you are numerous as the stars of heaven, because you would not obey the Lord your God. And the Lord shall scatter you among all people, from the one end of the earth to the other. And among these nations you will find no ease, neither shall the sole of your foot find rest. But the Lord shall give you there a trembling heart, and failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. And your life shall hang in doubt before you, and you will be in dread night and day, and shall have no assurance of your life, and no man shall save you.
That's crazy. Think about that. So the Jewish people were spread all over. You got Jews in every nation, but yet they maintained their identity. Like, there's no longer Babylonians. When Babylonian was conquered, those people became part of the people that had conquered them. They what do they call that? There's a word. It's like if somebody were to migrate to America, they assimilate and become Americans. So like, and then when the Medes and Persians were defeated, they assimilated into the Greek culture, and when the Greeks were conquered, they assimilated into the Roman culture. Like, you no longer have Ammonites, you no longer have Babylonians, you no longer have all these nations that were conquered. Those people assimilated into the conquering culture and became a part of that culture. But yet the Jews somehow, even though they were without a country for 2,000 years, maintained their Jewish culture, maintained their Jewish lineage. That's miraculous. And then all of a sudden, May 1st, 1948, they have a country again. That's crazy. That's a stunning, miraculous event.
Your sons and your daughters shall be given unto another people, while your eyes look on and yearn for them. But there will be nothing you can do. And you will never be anything but oppressed and crushed continually, so that you will be driven mad by the sight of what you see. And you shall become an astonishment, a proverb and a byword among all nations, to which the Lord shall lead you.
And there is no people ever in history that has been marked in that way, like the Jews. I mean, that in itself would be enough to tell you that the Bible is true.
Yeah, think about that.
God
Why do
said
people
that
hate
he'd be
Jews?
persecuted
Why?
and killed, but he would not let them be destroyed.
Hear the word of the Lord, O you nations. He who scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him, as a shepherd does his flock.
And why do I believe that the Jews are being encouraged to return to their land? Because God foretold that he would bring them all back. He said at the end of the age, in Old Testament prophecies, that they would not, that he would bring them back, as back to the land. And that once they were back to the land, they would never more be thrown out of it.
And I will bring back my exiled people Israel, and they shall build the waste cities and inhabit them. And they shall plant vineyards and drink their wine. They shall also make gardens and eat the fruit of them. And I will plant them upon their land, and they shall no more be pulled up out of their land, which I have given them, saith the Lord thy God.
So if you see Israel destroyed and annihilated, well, then we can throw away our Bibles and find another religion to believe in. Because God said absolutely clearly he would not allow them to be defeated.
The nation Israel will not cease to exist as a nation forever, God says in Jeremiah 31, beginning at verse 35. He says, if they cease, then there's no sun in the sky, there's no moon, there's no stars, the tides don't work, this universe is finished. That's how important Israel is.
If you believe in the prophetic time clock, and I do, I believe that the only way you can look, we as Christians can factor anything in at all, is we got to look at Israel. Israel's the key. Israel is the key. The prophecies hinge around Israel.
Israel is the key to all end time events, and we show that the actual clock ticking down toward the end of the age could not begin until Israel had returned back to our land.
So if I lived 200 years ago and you said, Lil, when's Jesus going to come back? And I would say, I don't know. He's going to come back. But I don't think we're in the window of time where that's going to happen.
Also, Israel had to be a nation for Armageddon to take place, because in Zechariah 14 we see, in 12 through 14 we see all the nations surrounding Israel. If Israel doesn't exist, you can't have all nations surrounding them to destroy them.
The word Armageddon has become a general term for destruction, calamity, and the end of the world, as represented by various artists, filmmakers, and authors. Yet its biblical meaning is more specific. According to the Bible, Armageddon is what happens when all the nations of the earth are gathered together against Jerusalem and the Jews. God declared that in the last days he would make Jerusalem a cup of trembling for all the nations of the earth.
Zechariah chapter 12 tells us that they'd be a burdensome stone, that if anybody sought to lift that stone, they'd be injured. We see the whole world is looking at Israel as a burdensome stone that's keeping the world from his world peace.
God said, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling, a burdensome stone in the last days for all the nations of the world. When they're in their siege against Jerusalem, and there's a siege against Jerusalem today, I mean, you can't believe it.
Well, a cup of trembling. I mean, what a stupid remark. I mean, what's that about? I mean, what a ridiculous statement to make. And scholars of the Bible point to that and go, please, Jerusalem, a cup of trembling, the whole world? Let's take it literally. Let's look at that 500 years ago. Let's look at it during the Crusades 1,000 years ago. Not to the whole world, it wasn't a cup of trembling, was it? Not to the whole world, in a literal sense. And I'm a literalist, unfortunately. But when it says the whole world, Jerusalem today is a cup of trembling to the whole world.
The United Nations has condemned Israel more than 370 times. They never condemned the Arabs for attacking them. They condemned the Jews for defending themselves. I mean, it's incredible. The whole world is against them. And God said, I will make them a cup of trembling. And this is the number one problem that the United Nations faces today. Everybody knows it. The United Nations has spent 1/3 of its time in deliberations and pronouncements about Jerusalem and Israel. This is a land that has 1/1000th of the world's population.
It's like the size of New
They spend
Jersey.
1/3 of their time on it.
Everyone's afraid of, what happens if, this powder cake starts off in the Middle East, and you're looking at World War III. It has become a cup of trembling to the whole world.
God foretold of the siege both against Judah, the Jews, and against Jerusalem. Then he goes on to speak of the day of the Lord, saying, Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, for I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. God makes it clear that what he does with Israel is to be a witness to all the nations of the earth.
In fact, in Isaiah 43:10, God says to Israel, you are my witnesses to yourselves and to the world that I am God. Not because we've got a lot of godly Jewish people running around the world telling people that God exists. They don't do that. But because of what the Bible said would happen to them, and it has happened.
I do not this for your sakes, O house of Israel, but for my holy name's sake. The nations shall know that I am the Lord, says the Lord God, when I shall be sanctified in you before their eyes. For I will take you from among the nations, and gather you out of all countries, and will bring you into your own land. Some might find it hard to believe that all the world would be against the Jews, since Israel seems to have many allies. Some have even believed that the Jews secretly control the world behind the scenes, manipulating media and world government. But God said of Israel under the curse of the law that there would be no might in their hand, and that Israel would be only oppressed and crushed always because of their disobedience. Can it be that in a mere half-century since the rebirth of Israel as a nation, that the Jews have overthrown all the ancient institutions of the world? Such allegations of a Jewish conspiracy were also propagated by Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party prior to the Holocaust. But this conspiracy for Israel's destruction is clearly mentioned in the Bible. The psalmist...
And that's why I emphasize on several videos the importance of having a biblical understanding. Because if you start down this road of investigating world conspiracies, A lot of people blame the Jews. You come to anti-Zionist information. Even the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which seem to outline the New World Order agenda, but then place the blame on the Jews. It's a misleading, they give you all these facts and then point the arrow at the wrong people. It's not a Zionist conspiracy. And like I mentioned before, there may be Jews involved. Like I think the Rothschilds claim to be Jewish, but maybe the Bible talks about people who claim to be Jews but are not Jews. So maybe that's the case with some of these people, but it's not a Jewish conspiracy. This is a satanic worldwide conspiracy that involves the elite from every tribe, nation, tongue, and nationality. It's a controlling system of elite, uber-rich, powerful people. Has nothing to do with Zionism or an Israeli agenda. So anytime you come across something in your research that points the finger at Israel, you can dismiss that nonsense. That's misleading, misdirecting. It's pointing you to the wrong enemy. They're not the enemy. They need the gospel. They need to be saved. But they're not the ones behind this conspiracy.
Keep not silence, O God, for lo, your enemies have taken crafty counsel against your people. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. They have consulted together with one consent. The psalmist then names the Arab nations of the ancient world, including the Philistines, from where we get the name Palestinian. Is it any wonder that the leader of the modern Palestine Liberation Organization, Yasser Arafat, has openly declared, quote, peace for us means the destruction of Israel and nothing else. But this desire is not confined to the Arabs, despite outward appearances. In 1994, John Loftus and Mark Ahrens, two secular authors, published their best-selling controversial work, The Secret War Against the Jews. Based upon 12 years of research, having interviewed more than 500 former officers of the intelligence community, the opening line of the introduction reads, quote, the major powers of the world have repeatedly planned covert operations to bring about the partial or total destruction of Israel. Meanwhile, the publisher includes this review saying, quote, the authors demonstrate that numerous Western countries, especially the United States and Great Britain, have conducted repeated and willful spying missions on Palestine and later Israel over many decades. While on the surface these two countries and others profess to be ardent allies of Israel, they work, in fact, through their intelligence services to betray Israel's secrets to the Arabs. Their motive, oil and multinational profits, which must be attained at any price. Foretells that events leading to Armageddon will be a time of trouble, the likes of which mankind has never before witnessed. Jesus said, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved.
That's an amazing prophecy. And you couldn't wipe out all flesh with bows and arrows and swords and spears and weapons that they had in that day. Not even with conventional bombs from World War II. But we live in a day where we have weapons so horrible. I mean, it is just beyond science fiction. You give us an address anywhere, and we'll send a bomb right through the front door from 500 miles away.
Man has the power to destroy the earth completely. Now, that's never happened before. They couldn't do it with bows and arrows and horses and so on and so forth.
In fact, the Bible says nations will turn their weapons on each other in Zechariah 14, and it says that as they're standing, their eyeballs and their tongues will be consumed and dissolved out of their mouths while they're on their feet. That wasn't impossible. That was impossible with weapons that we had just 80 years ago.
You couldn't have even foreseen when this prophecy, Jesus said, unless I intervene, no flesh is left. I think you got a nuclear exchange underway or about to start, and Jesus intervenes to rescue Israel. He's not going to let them be destroyed.
Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fought in the day of battle. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. When this
described
passage
in
is
Revelation
compared with the New
19.
Testament, we find further reassurance of the second coming of Christ. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus stood upon the Mount of Olives with his disciples. Perhaps they were considering Zechariah's prophecy when they asked, "Lord, will you at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel?" Jesus answered them, saying, "It is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father has put in his own power." Then as they beheld him, he ascended into heaven. The disciples seemed to watch in confusion, and so 2 men stood by in white clothing, who said to them, "You men of Galilee, why do you stand gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus who is taken up from you into heaven shall so come in like manner as you have seen him go into heaven."
Revelation
The
1:7
angels seemed
describes
to be
that.
reassuring the disciples that Jesus would indeed fulfill Zechariah's prophecy, that even as he ascended from the Mount of Olives, he would likewise return, and his feet will stand in that day in the same place he departed.
And he destroys Antichrist, because it's Antichrist. I believe it's not just Russia, in my opinion, and the Arab nations and Confederacy and so forth. Sure, they're there, but it's the whole world. The United States to everybody. And they're vying with one another, you know. The kings come from the east, maybe they can take over at this time. I don't know. It gets to be a whole mess and Armageddon. And God says in Ezekiel 38 that he brings the nations there to judge them, to punish them for what they've done to his people Israel. He also is punishing Israel. This is the final punishment for Israel. Jeremiah 30 verse 7 is called the time of Jacob's trouble, but he will be preserved out of it. So God is going to punish the world, and he's going to chastise his people. And then Christ will intervene, or there wouldn't be anybody left on this earth. I mean, we could turn this earth into a sterile bit of dust. Not even a microbe. Not even a mosquito or a cockroach left. We have the weapons to do that. And that's an amazing prophecy. That's Armageddon.
But how will all nations be gathered together against Jerusalem unless they are somehow united in a common cause? Bible researchers believe that cause will be the last day empire prophesied through Daniel and witnessed by the Apostle John. This empire will consist of a one-world government, a one-world religion, and a world economy, all united under a one-world leader, known in the Bible as Antichrist.
You can see it happen before your very eyes. This world church, really, the ecumenical movement, is going to be united with the world government.
Now we also have a hierarchy of elitists who are steeped in the mystery religions who want power. A very modern
That's critical to know.
a modern embodiment of that would be Hitler.
What she just said, you have to understand what's going on. You have to understand that the devil gives to the kingdoms, or gives the kingdoms to whom he will. He gives them to his servants. And there is a powerful group of elite, a very small group of people who run everything. They own all the industries through their various corporations and shell corporations, and through consolidation and monopolization. Every industry at the top levels is owned by the same elite families. There's approximately 13 of them. They're commonly referred to as the Illuminati. They are the ones that own everything and are directing everything towards this world system. And they're under Luciferian control. They worship Lucifer, and they're moving things towards his agenda. So that's critical to know.
Who brought about the Second World War because he wanted power. He was in an occult mystery religion, and he believed that the Aryan super race could take over the world.
That we're heading for a world government, there's no doubt that we're and that everything will be controlled with a number. that you won't be able to buy or sell, and so forth. We have the computers today to do it. You couldn't have believed. You can imagine what that would mean 100 years ago.
The Word of God says that the spirits, the demonic world, go forth to the kings of the world and gather them together for the battle of the great day of God Almighty, which in the Hebrew tongue is called Armageddon. So that these spirits had an objective, and it is to unite the world and bring the world against Christ on Armageddon.
Why do the nations rage and the peoples imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his Christ.
So we have got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of organizations that are working, in a sense, networking with each other to bring about a religious philosophy that will ultimately usher in the Antichrist.
When the Bible talks about the man of lawlessness, a one world government, a one world religion, you can make them.
World government has been declared by some of the greatest leaders and influential minds of the last century. The focus of their desire is supposedly world peace. Albert Einstein said, mankind's desire for peace can be realized only by the creation of a world government. Einstein also declared, quote, there is no salvation for civilization or even the human race other than the creation of a world government. Meanwhile, Nehru, the leader of India during the days of Mahatma Gandhi, declared, I have long believed the only way peace can be achieved is through world government. We have arrived at a stage where the next step must comprise a world and all its states submitting to the authority of world organization. Mortimer Adler said, world peace is impossible without world government. And Sir Winston Churchill declared, the creation of an authoritative world order is the ultimate aim toward which we must strive. French President Charles de Gaulle seemed adamant when he said, nations must unite in a world government or perish. Walter Cronkite said concerning nuclear devastation that, quote, if we are to avoid that catastrophe, a system of world order, preferably a system of world government, is mandatory. The proud nations someday will see the light, and for the common good and their own survival, yield up their precious sovereignty.
So another thing to... Oh, I'm sorry, let's finish the quote here.
Just as America's 13 colonies did 2 centuries ago.
So an important thing to remember is an occult philosophy, order out of chaos. They have an agenda that they want to accomplish, world government. But they realize that nations aren't just going to willingly give up their individual sovereignty. So they use scare tactics. They create conflict and world wars, and then say the only way we can solve this, the only way we can have peace is through world government. They create the chaos and then offer a solution to that chaos, knowing that people are going to be so scared that they'll do whatever the authorities tell them. If this is what it takes to get us safe, do it. That's why World War II brought about the formation of the United Nations. And so these people, they're getting their instructions through their occult organizations. They're members of satanic societies like high-level Freemasonry, Skull and Bones, Bohemian Club, things like that, where they do like seances and rituals and actual black magic and get instructions from principalities and powers, demonic forces that tell them we need world government. This is how you do it, and so they're moving everything. So you get these powers in place, the people in position moving things towards a world government, creating the chaos to scare everybody into that direction.
In 1992, Strobe Talbot, President Clinton's Deputy Secretary of State, was quoted in Time magazine saying, in the next century, nations as we know it will be obsolete. All states will recognize a single global authority. National sovereignty wasn't such a great idea after all. In December 2001, Edward Widmer, the president of the Illinois Division of the United Nations Association of the United States, said, quote, within 10 years' time, you're going to see the beginning of an embryonic world order. Britain's Prime Minister, Tony Blair, said, quote, globalization has transformed our economies and our working practices. It is a political and security phenomenon. We are all internationalists now, whether we like it or not. We are witnessing the beginnings of a new doctrine of international community. While the quote that seems to consolidate them all comes from Robert Mueller, former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, who said, "We must move as quickly as possible to a one-world government, a one-world religion, under a one-world leader." As to what manner of leadership is under consideration, consider this quote from Paul Henry Spaak, the former Secretary General of NATO, who in 1957 said, "What we want is a man of sufficient stature to hold the allegiance of the people and to lift us out of the economic morass into which we are sinking. Send us such a man, and be he God or the devil, we will receive him." Late in the 18th century, a group known as the Jacobins, who brought about the French Revolution, said they were seeking to establish what they called a universal republic or a new world order.
Jacobins are kind
That
of
very
the
phrase has
muscle
come to
or
represent the entire march toward world government,
like a
the
secret
coming last day empire, spoken of by the highest offices in all the world.
aggressive, like army type of the Illuminati.
Robert Kennedy, the former U.S. Attorney General in 1967, said, "All of us will ultimately be judged on the effort we have contributed to building a new world order." In October 1967, Richard Nixon was quoted in Foreign Affairs saying, "The developing coherence of Asian regional thinking is to evolve regional approaches to development needs and to the evolution of a new world order." A few years later, the New York Times reported that Nixon spoke of the talks as a beginning, merely reiterating the belief he brought to China that both nations share an interest in peace and building a new world order. On July 26, 1968, the Associated Press reported that New York Governor Nelson A. Rockefeller says as president he would work toward international creation of a new world order. In 1976, a new document surfaced that was called the Declaration of Interdependence. It was signed by 32 U.S. senators and 92 representatives in Washington, D.C. It read, in part, 2 centuries ago, our forefathers brought forth a new nation. Now we must join with others to bring forth a new world order. And Henry Kissinger, in an address before the United Nations in 1975, said, "So we say to all peoples and governments, let us fashion together a new world order." In 1994, Kissinger stated that the New World Order cannot happen without U.S. participation, as we are the most significant single component. Yes, there will be a New World Order, and it will force the United States to change its perceptions. This New World Order goal is supposedly for the good of all mankind, as Nelson Mandela affirmed in the Philadelphia Inquirer in October of 1994, when he said, "The New World Order that is in the making must focus on the creation of a world of democracy, peace, and prosperity for all." Democratic leader Richard Gephardt in the Wall Street Journal said, "We can see beyond the present shadows of war in the Middle East to a new world order where the strong work together to deter and stop aggression." This was precisely Franklin Roosevelt's and Winston Churchill's vision for peace for the post-war period.
To people who deny this conspiracy, do you think it's just coincidence that all these world leaders from all over the globe are speaking about the same agenda? They got the same goal. Read the book. It was one of the first books I ever read that kind of started me down this path. Opened my eyes a little bit. En Route to Global Occupation by Gary Kah, K-A-H, Gary Kah. He used to work in government. I think he was involved in state government, in some eastern state, like I want to say like Indiana or Ohio or something like that. But Gary Kah, En Route to Global Occupation. just to get you a start. There's plenty more. You can get the book by David Rivera, Final Warning, A New World Order. Tons others. I'll mention them as we go, as I remember them. But get that Gary Kaw one and check that out.
Even President Mubarak of Egypt is quoted in the New York Times saying that the renewal of the Non-Proliferation Treaty was described as important, quote, for the welfare of the whole world and the New World Order. Also, before the United Nations in 1979, Cuban dictator Fidel Castro said, "We must establish a new world order based on justice, on equity, and on peace." Mikhail Gorbachev, the former leader of the Soviet Union, made this rather disturbing association when he said, "We are moving toward a new world order, the world of communism. We shall never turn off that road." Perhaps most troubling of all is this quote from Adolf Hitler during the Second World War, who said, "National Socialism will use its own revolution for the establishing of a new world order." Such disturbing statements about the New World Order are not confined to Hitler. Historian Walter Mills, writing about World War I, described the efforts of Colonel Mandel House, the chief advisor to
His
President
name's going to
Wilson,
come up quite a
speaking
bit in
of
our
his
research.
hidden motive for involving America in the war. He wrote, "The Colonel's sole justification for preparing such a batch of blood for his countrymen was his hope of establishing a new world order of peace and security."
See, they create the chaos.
The Bible says, "The day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. For while they are saying peace and security, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape." The labor pains or birth pangs a woman suffers during childbirth come suddenly, but not all at once. The contractions are usually spread apart at first and can continue for many hours. But as the labor reaches its climax, the contractions quicken until they come one right after another. This is the picture given in the Bible of how catastrophic events will progress as the day of the Lord approaches. The starting gun for these contractions seems to be the cry of peace and security, as we saw with Colonel House and the First World War. In fact, during World War I, Nicholas Murray Butler, who ironically would win the Nobel Prize for Peace, gave this mysterious address before the Union League of Philadelphia on November 27, 1915. He said, "The old world order died with the setting of that day's sun, and a new world order is being born while I speak, with birth pangs so terrible that it seems almost incredible that life could come out of such fearful suffering and such overwhelming sorrow." An estimated 16 million lives were lost during World War I. But the
War is so
conflict to
evil.
come would make the Great War pale by comparison.
They're just going to kill people, man. It's messed up.
While the numbers vary, it is now estimated that some 50 million lives were lost as a result of World War II, a birth pang which began with a similar declaration of peace for the sake of security. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Adolf Hitler in 1938 to draft the Munich Accord for the purpose of supposedly providing security for Czechoslovakia and to assure the peace of Europe. Chamberlain arrived back in London with this historic announcement.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again.
I believe it is peace for our time, he said. Go home and get a nice quiet sleep. So confident were the British, they posted signs saying, "Don't mind Hitler, take your holiday." 6 months later, Hitler violated the agreement when the Nazis invaded Czechoslovakia. In less than a year, World War II was officially underway. Chamberlain's Declaration of Peace is today considered one of the greatest blunders of the 20th century. Can these events have been a foreshadowing of things to come? You be the judge as you consider this speech given by President George Bush Sr. when he spoke of the New World Order before the United States Congress in 1991.
A new world order where diverse nations are drawn together in...
Point something out here. I don't know if we'll have another chance. Do you see the two symbols on both sides of the flag there, the right and the left? It's interesting. It's a bundle of sticks, and what that's called is a fasci, which is where we get the word fascism from. Why in the world would the symbol for fascism be on our Capitol grounds? It's still to this day, if you watch a presidential speech in the background, you'll see those two symbols of fascism.
Common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind: peace and security, peace and security, freedom, and the rule of law.
Some find it interesting that President Bush made this declaration on September the 11th, 1991, exactly 10 years prior to the destructive attack on America. But Bush had spoken of the New World Order a year before. Concerning the crisis in the Persian Gulf, he said, "Out of these troubled times, a new world order can emerge." These words he spoke on September the 11th, 1990, 11 years prior to America's tragedy. Can all these things be merely coincidence? And why would world government and a desire for peace and security bring about destruction? Jesus said, "My peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, give I unto you." Can it be that the world peace pursued by kings and rulers is somehow contrary to the peace of Christ?
Yeah, they don't want peace and
James
safety.
Warburg of the
They want
Council on
complete
Foreign Relations,
control.
while speaking to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on February 17th,
Notice the symbol for the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, a rider on a white horse throwing up what looks like the devil symbol, the two fingers being raised up to the sky, like a man in rebellion against the king of the universe. And the word in Latin down there means something too. I can't remember what it means. I'm sure we'll get into that down the road as well. They like to advertise. The occult uses a lot of symbolism. There's like witchcraft itself, the magic has a fascination with symbols and numbers. They think that there's power involved in using the right numbers or the right symbols, the right potion. Remember when witches would make potions in the cartoons? You need a dabble of this and a dabble of that. They'd have to get it just right. They have formulas that they use with symbols and numerology and things like that. And who knows, in the spirit world, maybe demons are attracted to these certain things. But the occult world is obsessed with it. And they always announce themselves in their symbols. So if you get familiar with some of the symbols of occultism, you can spot it left and right. You can spot Starbucks using an occult symbol. You can spot Target using an occult symbol. Dodge using an occult symbol. Rockstar Energy Drink using an occult symbol. All these different corporations that are obviously owned or controlled by these occult forces. They advertise it. The Council on Foreign Relations, the European Union, they use occult symbolism.
50 said, "We shall have world government whether or not we like it. The question is only whether world government will be achieved by consent or by conquest." An early warning against the tone of this movement was sounded by Congressman Larry P. McDonald, who even named some of those he deemed responsible when he said, "The drive of the Rockefellers and their allies is to create a one-world government, combining super-capitalism and communism under the same tent, all under their control. Do I mean conspiracy? Yes, I do. I am convinced there is such a plot, international in scope, generations old in planning, and incredibly evil in intent." Arthur Schlesinger Jr. in the July-August 1995 issue of Foreign Affairs said, "We are not going to achieve a new world order without paying for it in blood as well as words and money." Decades earlier, famed author H.G. Wells, who wrote such works as The Time Machine and The Invisible Man, was also a member of a controversial group known as the Fabian Socialist Society. While his science fiction books are well known, Wells also wrote a little-known work titled The New World Order, published in 1939. In it he states, "Countless people will hate the New World Order and will die protesting against it." When we attempt to evaluate its promise, we have to bear in mind the distress of a generation or so of malcontents, many of them quite gallant and graceful-looking people.
And we're going to stop there. That's the 1 hour and 30-minute mark and 5 seconds. So, Lord willing, that's where we'll pick up next time. All right, so a lot of information. I apologize. I guess a lot of this... There's so much information in my head that when I hear something, I kind of just spit it out. I wanted to try to do everything as logical and orderly as possible. So I hate to give out information out of order and just kind of in a convoluted mess. You know, especially in regards to that prophecy stuff. A lot of the stuff I was saying, it might sound just kind of all twisted up and jumbled. You know, I just want to... I don't know. I guess I wanted to make sure that we're understanding things correctly. And some of these documentaries, I'm not always going to be in agreement with 100% of what's said, and so I'm going to point that out when it occurs. But hopefully, you know, the Lord will guide you in your studies and in your understanding. At the same time, while you're studying this kind of stuff, you ought to be studying doctrine and theology. And paramount above all things is just getting yourself familiar with the scriptures, taking the scriptures in a contextual, literal, historical context. And what I mean by that is reading it in its context, you know, what's being said, historical, who's it being said to, why is it being said, and literal, contextual, historical literalism is, you know, if it's speaking poetically, of course, you take that poetically, but you just read things in their natural setting in a literal sense. God doesn't write riddles. You know, yeah, the prophecies, we're not always going to have understanding because it's talking about something future, something we haven't seen or experienced yet, so we're not going to realize it fully until it occurs. But just study the scriptures diligently. Make sure you're familiar with the Word of God yourself, so that you're not relying on anybody else's opinions or thoughts or speculation about it, but that you know it. And in the meantime, so if I'm adding confusion, you know, to your studies, then by all means stop listening to me and just get into the Word. Make sure you know the Word fully before you start investigating anything else. So anyways, that's what I got for you guys tonight. As always, I truly appreciate you watching. This is a great joy for me. This is probably out of all the different things I do with the podcast, the different video series, this is my favorite. This is where my heart has been for a long time. I've wanted to share these things in a linear, logical, reasonable fashion, and so this is very enjoyable for me, and I appreciate you coming along for the journey. Bear with me when I ramble. Dismiss anything you disagree with. You know, just study it out for yourself. All right, I love you guys, and we'll talk to you next time.